Hey everybody, Asher here, back with more Kerbal Space Program, and I am sure you can read the title. So yes, that's right, we're going to be talking a lot about a lot of different missions that have been going on here. I've had to take a little bit of time just to make sure that I can cut and edit this properly, and unfortunately, instead of just crapping out a video for you and getting it out faster, it means I had to wait a little bit, so I hope you all don't mind. I know some of y'all have been looking for content here, so let's go ahead and get started. First off, as you may remember from the Kerbal alarm clock before, we do have Eeloo, or Eeloo as I've been calling it for years, coming up on horizon here, and this is the probe that I'm using. It is actually one that is powered by somewhat solar power and then ion engines. Now let me tell you what's fun about ion engines is that they do run on xenon gas, because that's cool apparently, and then solar power. I'm just going to launch this up. This is actually my second attempted launch. The first launch didn't go very well, if only because I got into orbit and realized that without any kind of reaction control and without any thrust vectoring, because the ion engines don't have that, pretty much my ship was at the mercy of, it was pointed one direction in space, and that's all it could really do. So this is a probe. It's unmanned, and it is going to be going to Eeloo, or Eeloo. You can tell me in the comments how to pronounce it, because apparently I am not too sure here. Now, obviously, this launch is time accelerated here, but the key point of this probe is that it is going to be able to use a lot of xenon gas to slowly propulse itself towards Eeloo. And the issue that we're going to face is that from the 1.0 update, and I apologize for the little gap there, but from the 1.0 update on, they did, Squad actually, changed the way that solar power works in the game to match real life. And what that means is that, guess what, you don't get nearly as much power from the sun around, say, Pluto or Neptune as you do around Mercury or Venus. So while solar panels are stronger, and we've already seen this in the Duna episodes and everything, the further away you get from Kerbal or the sun, the less effective it gets. Well, let me tell you, Eeloo is by far the furthest thing away possible, and solar power is going to be a problem. So we have a ton of batteries, and that is really, we're going to be leaning on those batteries pretty hard, because I can only burn my ion engines while there is power. And I do have some fuel tanks here that actually have fuel. The reason is because there are fuel cells there, but there's a nice pretty sort of separation. Unfortunately, because this probe is so light, I can actually get into orbit and do most of my exit burn with just the Rockamax engine right there. So I was very impressed that you can see the other thing just slowly as I fade out. But I do decide to cut forward here because there's a lot of maneuver node finagling you have to do. You can see that I do have the node going slightly out above. This is only because this is on the second pass trying to get the exit angle here, but there is an Eeloo encounter. Now you can see that I'm doing a mid-course correction to adjust this, and it does take a little bit of work with your normal, anti-normal, other angles. All those little maneuver markers, you need to learn to know how to use them. But once again, if you focus on the planet, and I'll probably do that here in just a minute, you can get a little bit closer and see just how tight of a window you do to get into Eeloo. So you can see I'm focusing on the planet right here, and you can see our maneuver marker. If we get a little closer, I have a lot of problems getting these markers to actually work, but if we go closer, you can see right there just how tiny of an adjustment it takes to even move this down. And all I'm trying to do is to get in a good orbit. As you can see, I'm a little concerned about where it is, but there, we're actually pretty close to Eeloo. I'm going to mispronounce it, and not just mispronounce it, but we'll just pronounce it inconsistently the whole time, which is great, I know, for some people. Now, the thing that we're probably going to run into later on is that when I do make this correction burn eventually, is that it is going to be just on the back of my ion thrusters, and it's probably going to have to retake a burn here. And then on top of this, because Eeloo has no atmosphere, although science reports will probably tell us that it has like a slight icy atmosphere, much like we estimate Pluto is, and hype about the mission that's going to be going past Pluto soon, we're going to have to do a lot of ion burning just to break into an orbit around this planet. I've only ever done a flyby of Eeloo. We're going to go for an actual landing this time around. But now we're on to the Gilly lander mission. Speaking of landing on tiny bodies. So what we got here today is just, well, you can see from before, my orbit was pretty screwed up. And it took me a lot of work just to try and figure out, well, how the hell am I actually going to get to Gilly? So what I'm trying to do here is just to bastardize the orbit just a bit. All I want to do is to have something that cross-references. You can see the amount of delta V it's taking, and I ran into this issue a ton, an absolute metric ton. So that's going to be just a problem to start with right there, is that Gilly is not on the side I want it to be on. And because I didn't properly do a proper injection aerobrake, if I'm throwing my jargon around hard enough, to in other words get an equatorial orbit, which means it would probably take around 800, 900 delta V just to get to Gilly, and then a bit more to orbit around it. What we're facing instead is the far more terrifying thing of, can I get into an equatorial orbit first, or do I have to do something else just to adjust here? Because Eve has such a high gravity, adjusting your orbit around it is going to take definitely some extra work. And you can see right here as I'm messing with maneuver nodes, and this is where I start to feel really the struggle of this mission. Maybe it's the B team that I took with me. Jeb's sitting on Ike right now, Bill, Bob, Valentina. A lot of my more experienced crew is waiting for a return window from Duna to Kerbin. So you can see that once again I'm just going for this way, trying to adjust, and it is going to take some time for Gilly to get around here, but I do find a way where I can kind of slice my burn here and get Gilly to land at just the right time. But once again, this takes so much fuel just to make this happen, but look at how far our encounter is. But at least we can potentially time an encounter. So there is my strategy. It's a terrible strategy, and it means I'm going to be essentially trying to get a sort of polar orbit onto Gilly, which is not bad, because once I get to Gilly, this probe is equipped to refuel, although I almost forgot a fuel tank entirely, which is terrible, but I do have a fuel tank popped on top of it. So that is going to work out pretty well. Of course, the thing is that I've actually got to get there first, so that's kind of our plan. But you can see eventually here is the actual burn as it's happening. Our fuel supplies are going. This is going to be pretty tight for whether we can make it to Gilly or not, but yeah, there is the stretch burn. Everything is going so slowly. In fact, I'm not even sure I'm time accelerating these clips anymore, if this is just the real-time burn. So because the sound's muted, because this is post-commentary, I can go... Okay, it just sounds more like a dentist office than the actual rocket, so I guess I can't really pull that off. But it is one Poodle engine, and I guess if there was one concern I had going into this, I think I even expressed the concern when I was launching this up to the Eve Dervish. It's, can this thing actually make it to Gilly, or am I going to have to push out with the Dervish and kind of drop it off near Gilly? Well, I went ahead and disconnected it from the ship, so we're going to have to try. Part of the reason is because the Dervish has such a low fuel profile itself. It doesn't have a lot of fuel to necessarily get back, and I want to make sure that it can actually get back to Kerbin. So we do burn into an encounter with Gilly, barely, but we have one. We should. I recorded this video. I know there's an encounter that's coming up, but we just got to barely tap on the fuel. There we go. Like I said, Gilly is, even though Eeloo is very hard to get to, Gilly has the tiniest gravity of anything in the solar system, 0.01, I believe, compared to Kerbal. So literally 1% gravity. If you jump at the right place, you can probably put yourself in the orbit on escape velocity or pretty close. So here's the issue. We have the refueler. We have not a lot of fuel, but our brave crew is ready to go from the poles of Eve to maybe one of the worst designed missions I've had in a series of terribly designed missions. So let's go to the Gilly hopper, and let's go ahead and hop on top of Gilly right now. Just a little bit of time acceleration should do it. Come on, here we go. Yeah, it's all very, like I said, it's going to be very close. Maybe even a crash landing in the Gilly is not exactly unheard of or unwarranted because, well, I mean, it's Gilly. It's practically a large asteroid. I think it's like 16 kilometers wide. So it is, I guess, in the class of a planet killer if you're going from everything else. But just trying to make my final adjustments, make sure that I can get an encounter. The nice thing is that, when I get by there, we do have some science and a scientist that's right there, ready to make things happen. But Here we go, a little bit more time acceleration. Gilly's going to come closer, closer. This freaks me out a little bit in the same way that getting to Mimbus does, where I'm looking at this, I don't exactly trust the maneuver nodes because of the eye test, and I'm like, am I really going to have Gilly meet me at the same time here? Because when you do get further from the planet, your orbital velocity is slower, so you're not necessarily passing through things quickly, but yeah, there's Gilly. It's coming. It's hard to see outside the window, but it's there. So, very close. Just try to take a peek outside, and we can't really see it, but we do go ahead and see what science is available. Not a ton. I think I did pick up a side contract for get some orbital science around Eve. So yeah, there's the bonus contract. Just a little bit of cash. So, not an entirely failed mission, I guess you could say, but there is Gilly on the horizon. Once again, I'm looking for it in the sky, and Gilly is small. Things are hard enough to see in this game, especially with an upgraded skybox. So, and the funny thing is, looking back in the video, I know where Gilly's supposed to be, and I'm still not seeing it. So, I was terrible at Where's Waldo things before, and I'm pretty terrible with it now. So, that's what we've learned. Alright, so, Gilly, we're just about there. So this is the moment that a lot of people have been waiting for, I guess, at Kerbal Space Center, where can we get a refueling mission to actually work? And right now, I'm pretty confident. I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, here's Gilly, here's the science, here's the quick save. Everything is going to be fine, and then there's Gilly popping up like a little oblong thing that you can just land on and make good with. And there's Eve in the distance. So Eve, pretty small, but not as small as, say, Minmus to Kerbin. But let's go ahead and look at the maneuver node real quick. How much delta V am I going to need to put into orbit? The thing is that because Gilly has such a tiny, as we're getting our encounter right around here, Gilly has such tiny mass, tiny gravity, you can't really use it to slow yourself down like maybe the moon. Of course, the moon has no atmosphere, but it doesn't take as much energy to stop yourself from around the moon because the gravity is trying to pull you in. With Gilly, it's pretty much all on your ship to stop you. So let's go ahead and see if I burn retrograde. How much delta V is it going to take to get into... Oh, no, that's not good. I actually stopped myself for a second. I was like, are you sure? Are you sure that is actually how much it's going to take? So, yeah, we are getting close to Gilly, and once again, I'm testing, and yeah. Guess what, guys? We have a mission fail, and there's nothing you can do to really save yourselves. Not only are you away from the Eve Dervish, but there is absolutely no way other than the Alt F12 menu to get these guys down onto Gilly. So, well, what do we say about this? We say this is Kerbal Space Program, and if you're not ready to go in there and fail some missions to try and get better, like I may have told y'all before, I've only ever put something in orbit around Eve. I've never actually flown to Gilly, so this is the closest I've gotten to Gilly so far. But right now, we are just burning with all of our might, maybe hoping that the flight computers are wrong. We have all the science available. Look at how fast Gilly is flying by. It is so little. It is so very little. If we could actually conceivably not time accelerate and still miss it. I think my encounter total, it's hard for me to see the size of the text sometimes, but I think my encounter was only like 2 minutes. Regardless, because we are going in a completely different direction. So we have to really make things work. So I'm trying to get all the science that I can. I'm going to have to broadcast the science. But do you see the faces of my crew? Yeah, that is right. Our wonderful scientist, one of our engineers as well, they know what's up. They know that, guess what? They may not particularly like each other, or maybe they do. I don't know, but they're going to have to get to know each other for a while because they are totally stranded. Completely stranded. They have no fuel. They have all the means to refuel, but no way to actually do it. So maybe I should have plotted my course so that I would drive myself right into the core, or right into the place, but no, that's not going to work because that would have just crashed everything. So here's the extra challenge. We have Eve there looking all pretty and serene. We have Gilly flying by. And unfortunately, we have no means of getting back to the Dervish. No means of going anywhere, no means of refueling. So what's the catch? Well, that is the catch. What's the additional catch? Well, I'll tell you. Because we are in an orbit that can actually get us near or by Gilly, it is entirely possible that when the next time the orbits intersect between this vessel and Gilly, that we get a gravity assist from Gilly. Now you may think to yourself, gravity assist. Oh, we like gravity assists. Unless you go on the wrong side of Gilly. Well, let's hear it. There's two kinds of gravity assists you can get from Gilly. One is one that will put you out of Eve's sphere of influence. We don't want that. We don't want to be slingshot around the sun. The other one is one that will put us into the upper atmosphere of Eve, which means, of course, this is not equipped to survive a landing on Eve. There are no parachutes or anything like that. And of course, there's no fuel to slow down either. Although this would be interesting to see if it could refuel on Eve, it does not have the means to get back up out of the atmosphere. This was designed to fly around Gilly. But yeah, there we go. Total mission screw up. Not only did I miss Gilly as there it is flying away, I may have just doomed my crew to either go into the purple abyss or fly around the sun. Lord knows if I can get a rescue mission. So here is the polar orbit mission, from one failure to other. I told you there'd be some mission failure. If you read the title, you'd know. And let's see here. The good news is that I can get this in a polar orbit. The bad news is look at what the contract says I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to get it pretty much 40 degrees across the z-axis to a different location. Actually, not even 40, more like 80 degrees. So good news is that we do have a polar orbit, and right now I'm just trying to do an orbital survey scan. But if you look at how much fuel I have available, once again, can you tell what the issue is here? I have a contract. What is it with my satellite contracts for planets? The Duna ones didn't even make it to Duna here, but apparently it looks like I've under-engineered these things quite a bit because there's really nothing that's going to happen here. Now, the good news is that at least I should be able to get in a proper polar orbit so that I can scan for resources on Eve, because yay, well, that counts for a minuscule amount of science. But more importantly, if I do get a mission later on that's supposed to be refuel and leave from Eve, maybe I can know a better place to land. Of course, a lot of the places where there are resources would be counterbalanced by the fact that Eve's atmosphere becomes a nightmare the closer you get to the ground, as we've already seen from another video. So let's do the scan again, and once again, we do not have the right we don't have the right window. For some reason, a polar scan is not enough. You have to be at a certain altitude. Feels a little gamey, but I guess I understand you got to be up at a certain altitude to see more things. I don't know. I mean, if you're trying to do some kind of scan of the resources below, I know we don't necessarily have the technology in real life to say, hey, let's look at the resources under the ground, just based on this. Although maybe you can surprise me. Maybe there is some stuff where I know a lot of the scanning that we do of things in the far, far distance of space is from mass spectrometry, which is one of my favorite things from chemistry before. And if you're not familiar with what a mass spec is, it's essentially looking at how light changes based on when light hits a chemical or a compound, when it reflects back. Essentially, if you look at the light waves and everything through a mass spec, or back when they were looking at it in the early days of discoveries, you can see I'm screwing this up here. Different compounds will return different light waves, and certain bands of light will be missing. And what that boils down to is you can see that I do not have anywhere near the delta V to make this maneuver, so that is ding ding, another mission failure. But because you're missing different bands, you can tell what is in a certain area. You can tell if a planet far away has water of some kind. Now, you can't tell if it's frozen solid or if it's liquid or if it's constantly evaporating from whatever. But you can look out and tell, okay, this is something in the far distance, and there is water there. There is silicon there. There is carbon there. So mass spec, like I said, one of my favorite things, very cool. And I guess there's some modification here. But look, we do have under the cloudscape here all kinds of things, but there's another mission failure. And what's this? The Jool orbital station is actually nearing its maneuver node to do a mid-course correction to try and get to Jool. That's right. How long am I going to just be piling this one on here? Is right now we have our other missions just stranding derelict around Eve. Yeah, this is the unmanned Jool launcher here. As you can see, I already have not a lot of fuel in general. I do have a lot of nuclear fuel left, but my goal here is just to try and get some sort of air capture for Jool. So there's Jool. There's the maneuver I want. Here's the maneuver I'm going to get. So let's burn. Once again, this is unmanned. Everything was cooked by the nuclear engines getting too hot. Can I get anywhere near an air capture? Can I even get within like the different moons? And look, there's a little Kerbal alarm clock saying, hey, look, the thing that you're burning on, it's going right now. Thanks, Kerbal alarm clock, because I failed again. Yeah, this is a really good series of missions for me. I told you all I'd be screwing up things eventually. And here is the episode where everything is going to hell. This is what happens when when everybody who's the expert at Kerbal Space Center decides, you know, we'll lock some tourists in a room and call it a day. We don't really have to work or design here. But I'm going to set an alarm to make sure that I do not miss the Jool encounter. Fortunately, I'm not killing any Kerbins by this way, but it is a 1 million plus Kerbuk science station that is not going to get nearly the money or worth. Because I do have a contract to explore Jool, but part of that includes getting an orbit. That's not happening. So, once again, we get yet another failure, so that's not great. But we're now going to go back to the Ion, the Eve lander probe, which maybe we can get some good out of this. Because, like I said, we're starting to zoom a lot forward in time. We are not at the transfer window from Duna to Kerbin yet, but I cannot wait for that window because that means I get some of my crew back, although I'm starting to get some rescue missions there. But let's go ahead and just look. Here is the burn that I am doing. And you can see I'm doing things very carefully. And even if I burn really hard, look at how slow this is. This is with 3 ion thrusters. It takes that much just to make the Delta V happen. So I'm watching my little marker here. You can see that I'm once again going a bit beyond the orbital arc for Eeloo, if only because Eeloo is so hard to get to. If you get an encounter, even if it's not the most efficient encounter, just take it. Please, just take it. You're not going to do everything perfectly in Kerbal Space Program, but after the other missions I've had at least hell, can I get something there? And look at this. My encounter is close, but no cigar. But there we go. A little bit more. I got to burn just a little bit closer. Because once again, when you do an actual burn, that changes really everything. Like, you can see the dotted line that I had before. That was the old maneuver marker. Now I'm going to have to do yet another mid-course correction. But what I can also do is just look at this. This is how much Delta V I'm going to need to get around an orbit of Eeloo. This is one reason getting to Eeloo takes so much Delta V. Some people would say Eeloo is by far the most difficult place to get to in the solar system. I still say that getting in a close orbit of the sun is very difficult, and thus getting to Moho is very difficult, but Eeloo is also a worthy challenge, if only because you have to balance the fact that there is, and it's a lot harder in 1.0 because you can't just have a bunch of solar power and do it that way. But you can see I'm going to do another tiny mid-course correction. You can see how far away the maneuver node is for this, and all I want to do is to get a really, really close encounter here. So for all my other mission failures, at least right now, this probe is going to be in the neighborhood of Eeloo, so that's a start. I do not have a current contract for it, so I'm probably not going to get any monies for really exploring anything. And by the time it gets there, a lot of my science stations and everything will very likely have completed my science tree. So this is more for a quest for glory, which is going to be a lot of what this series is from here on out. I will get some contracts to go to Jool, the moons around Jool, Dres, Eeloo, Moho, and we are going to visit all the places, and that'll be very exciting. But I've also never landed on Eeloo, so that is where we're going to start. And once again, look, that is good enough for me. We're getting pretty close. We're going to have a pretty close encounter, and how much Delta V do we need? That much. I think I can do it. That is a long burn, and it's going to take a long time. Oh, we just got ourselves a lot closer. But hey, pretty cool. So, like I said, I just want to remind you all one more time is that this is not always a video series. It is going to be a series of successes. Now, while I didn't kill any Kerbals in this episode, I did waste a lot of money. I did essentially every single thing except for landing on Eve. I failed. So we're going to have to send a rescue mission to rescue everybody. I don't know if I'll be able to rescue Alvy Kerbin, who's currently on the surface of Eve right now. But the important thing is that at least for the moment, let's just go ahead and check the science I can do around the sun. There's probably a tiny bit that I can do if we just broadcast it out. But yeah, it's very interesting that we're going to Eeloo, and that'll be in pretty far in the distant future. But in the meantime, I believe next episode is going to be essentially, let's start getting the rescue gear together to rescue all of our people stranded by Eve. I also have asteroids to explore, lots of other stuff to do, but this is Asher. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.